Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Connections After Hours meeting of the On Purpose Women Global Community. I am recording for you tonight the speaker portion of this meeting. I am Jenny Robertson, the founder of the On Purpose Women Global Community and the founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. Our speaker tonight, Gina Hogan Edwards, will be talking about the power of writing. Gina Hogan Edwards supports women in claiming the power of their voices on the page, from a stage, at work, and in their everyday lives. She provides safe spaces that empower women to share their truth and create a legacy of positive change in the world. Gina is a Woman Speak Circle leader and a co-host of the Around the Writers' Table podcast. Also, please join Gina at her Facebook community called Women Writing for Change. And Gina will be speaking on the power of writing. So thank you, Gina, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for having me, and it's good to see everybody tonight. This is a topic that I can talk on for hours, so we're going to see what we can fit into the next 25 minutes or so. Let me see a show of hands, if you would, for who writes. Okay, that's a pretty general question, right? So all of us write in some form or fashion, so let's narrow it down a little bit. Who writes out their goals? Anybody purposefully write out goals? Okay. What about to-do lists? You make to-do lists? All right. When you have a decision to make, do you write out lists of pros and cons? Anybody do that? I know I do that one a lot. All right. Do we have any bloggers? Anybody have a blog? Cool. Okay. 2 of you. Who has written or is writing a book? Anybody? Several hands there. Great. Who journals or does, if you know what that morning pages are, anybody do morning pages or journal? Okay, great. All right. Thank you for that. So writing can be used for practical activities like the decision making and the goal setting, but it's also a powerful transformative tool for personal development, for more conscious and aware living. One of my favorite writers and my favorite quote is from a writer named Joan Didion. She was one of the foremost writers about the 60s counterculture, the 70s Hollywood lifestyle, politics. She wrote about a lot of things. She's got several memoirs. One of them was nominated for the Pulitzer called The Year of Magical Thinking. Fabulous book if you have never read it. So she was a very prolific, amazing writer. And the quote that she said that I really resonate with is, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see and what it means, what I want and what I fear. And that encapsulates most of my feelings about the power of writing. So that's my presentation. Just kidding, of course. All right, so tonight I want to touch on 3 things that I believe writing is particularly powerful for: creating clarity, improving your health, and achieving emotional balance. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can even rewrite our lives for the better. So Didion said in her quote, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking. So writing down your thoughts can help clear your mind. And I'm not just talking about like purposefully sitting down and writing your conscious thoughts, because there's always so much more below the surface that if we just allow it to come up, can give us insights that our conscious mind isn't aware of at all. One way to do that is by free writing. Has anybody ever done free writing before? Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with free writing, it is simply not allowing your hands or fingers to stop when you start writing. So you could do it on the computer, on a keyboard, or you could do it with a pen and paper. But when you start writing, you just write whatever comes to mind, and you don't stop writing. You keep that hand moving, or you keep those fingers moving. You can really declutter your mind that way. When you do free writing, You don't judge yourself. You don't pay attention to spelling. You don't pay attention to sentence structure. If you do it on the computer, I actually like to not look at the screen or to cover the screen. So doing that sort of free writing can really clear your mind, get that clutter out on the paper. And that sort of writing can lead you to better decisions because you're getting all the garbage out of the way. It can also help you work through and resolve problems. Because like I said, if you allow yourself the freedom of just putting down whatever comes to mind, a lot of things that are below the surface really start to come up. You don't have to reread when you do free writing. You might want to, but you don't have to. It might just be a brain dump or stuff you just need to get out. Maybe stuff you just want to complain about and get it out of the way. If you do go back and reread it, being able to review those jumbled thoughts and then maybe reorganize them on the paper, that can start to reveal patterns in your thinking. You can start to uncover connections that way. It can help you recognize some potential outcomes that you might not have realized before you started doing the writing. In addition to that, the writing can become a recorded history of real outcomes. It can become your proof of your growth and your personal development. Another aspect of getting clarity in writing is about making sense of the world. And that's both in our own lives and in the greater world. So Didion says that she writes to discover what she's thinking, what she sees, and what it means. And every one of us, at some point, we ask the question, what's the meaning of life? What is the meaning of this greater life? What's the meaning of my life? We talk about seeking meaning, finding meaning, looking for meaning. To me, the idea of making meaning in life is far more appealing than any of those. Seeking, finding, looking, all of those suggest to me that meaning is external to us, that it's not of our own doing, outside of our purview, and that we have to really search to discover it. And I prefer the philosophy that we make meaning, that we create the meaning in our lives. And I feel like that's a lot more powerful. And it's also kind of both at the same time exciting and soothing to me to think about making meaning in that way. And that's something that writing can do for us. So the second thing that I hope you'll come to know about writing, if you don't already know this, is that writing can help us achieve an emotional balance. When we're feeling out of control, like life is unmanageable, overwhelming, which is happening for a lot of us these days, we can actually write ourselves into a more emotionally balanced state. If you're feeling some kind of emotion acutely, writing about it can help you understand the emotion, and it can help you develop deeper understanding of yourself. But more importantly, and what I think is the most fascinating thing, is that you can develop a deeper understanding of your reaction to that emotion and how you deal with it. When we create this sort of a written insight into ourselves, then we learn how to identify our emotions more accurately, and also to identify any emotional triggers that we might have. Writing also gives us a pathway for us to move toward emotions that we want to feel. And one way to do that is by writing about a specific time in your past when you experienced an emotion that you want to experience more often, okay? So writing about it by using very specific description, like creating a scene, really, writing the situation out on the page, include dialogue, engage the senses, make sure all the senses are included in your description, really paint a very vivid and memorable picture. And what that piece might then become for you is an anchor. You can display it somewhere prominent, or you can keep it safely hidden away for use when you need it. But when you're feeling some way that you don't want to feel, then you can refer to that. And when that sort of writing is done regularly, these records can be referred to as reminders of how you've coped with difficult situations, how you did it in the past, and also how much you've achieved and grown. Okay? So the page is what I call a compassionate receiver of our thoughts and our feelings. The page doesn't judge us. We can put them there uncensored. So I like to think of the blank page as a compassionate receiver. So writing does create a record of our thoughts and emotions, but that isn't all it does. I think anybody on this screen who journals probably recognizes that writing is good for your mental health. I think that's pretty well established. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's also good for your physical health. There are scientific studies out now that are really beginning to show the benefits of both of these. Has anybody heard the term narrative medicine before? Okay, it's a little bit outside of the purview of our talk, but I wanted to bring it up because it has a very specific definition in the medical field. And it's based on the principle that every patient has a story behind their physical symptoms. And there are doctors that are starting to acknowledge that, which I find fascinating and exciting. The Association of American Medical Colleges has something on their website about narrative medicine, and it says a patient's stories can illuminate how a person became ill, the tipping point that compelled them to seek help, and perhaps most importantly, the social challenges they face in getting better. Knowing how to get patients, remember this is written toward doctors, knowing how to get patients to share their stories can be transformative in improving patient care. Yeah. So like I said, this goes beyond the scope of our talk, but I'm so fascinated by this approach in the medical field that I wanted to bring that up. And I think the term itself and the ideas behind it are just really fascinating and useful to ponder. I believe wholeheartedly that story is medicine, both for the mind and the body. When we keep our thoughts and emotions bottled up inside, physical symptoms can show up. Loss of appetite, headaches, stomach upset, palpitations, mood swings, all of those things are symptoms of us bottling up our thoughts and our emotions, our self-expression. Years ago, when I was still working in my corporate job, I'd been going through a time, about 2 weeks, where I was particularly cranky, been working a lot of hours. I had a lot of pain in my body. I was snippy with my husband. So I walked into the kitchen one morning and I guess I must have said something particularly snippy. And he looked at me and he said, "You aren't writing, are you?" And it was in that moment when I really recognized the impact that keeping up my writing practice has on me, how it affects me both mentally and physically. And it was interesting to me that my husband recognized that as well. When I'm able to identify my thoughts and my feelings at a given point about a specific situation or a circumstance and kind of challenge that I'm going through, when I can do that through my writing, it's a way for me to self-observe. And to me, that's therapeutic. I don't know what your experience has been with journaling, but that's an experience for me. There is a mind and body connection when we write. And when we write by hand, which I highly advocate, and so many of us don't do it anymore, there is a head and heart and hand connection that gets created that you just don't get when you're using the keyboard. With that head and that hand and that heart connection, we're able to take our inner emotions and thoughts and make them external. We take those emotions that we don't want to have, like stress and anxiety, part of that inner turmoil that we may have, and we get it out onto the page. And for me, that helps release their energy, their grip on my body. So if you haven't experienced that, I urge you to try journaling. and really being honest with yourself when you sit down and you write out your thoughts. You know, you are, when you write down your thoughts and your feelings and your worries, you're taking a conscious, positive action, and that can relieve the internal pressures and really help you regain some calmness. So a couple of the studies about the mental effects. Some psychologists have found that writing about your feelings can help the brain overcome emotional upset and actually leave you feeling happier. Another study concluded that even 1 hour of writing about some distressing event helped participants make sense of those events and reduce their distress. And here's a really cool thing, is that very same study, they showed that writing can even heal physical wounds faster. So there is more and more study these days about the physical effects. Another study showed that expressive writing, which is like journaling, if you do that for just 15 to 20 minutes a day, for 3 to 5 times over the course of 4 months, not even 3 to 5 times a week, but they did the study over 4 months, then it was enough to lower blood pressure and improve liver function. There was a Texas study that found that regular journaling can help improve the immune system. And that fellow's study suggested that symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis and asthma could be lessened. So I could go on and on. There's all kinds of studies about reducing office visits, improving mood, improving memory, reducing symptoms for cancer patients, improving health after a heart attack. So the science is supporting the fact that writing helps us not only mentally, but physically too. If you want to try using writing to improve your health, if you haven't done this before, then please consider journaling. 15, 20 minutes a day, a couple of times a week. You just need a private space, give yourself no distractions so that you can write honestly without censoring yourself, without interruption, pen and paper, notebook, and pad in hand, just go to it. That sort of a small routine has the possibility to create all kinds of positive change in your physical and mental health. Another way to ease into the writing habit, is anybody familiar with Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way and Morning Pages?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So just briefly, morning pages are before you engage, before you answer your email, before you get into conversation with the people in your life. You can go have a cup of coffee or go get your cup of coffee, but sit down with a notebook and write for 3 pages. And it can be drivel. It can be anything you want it to be. It can be, Gina told me I needed to do morning pages and I don't know why, but I'm sitting here doing them anyway. It really doesn't matter what it is. Just sit there, and Julia Cameron's philosophy is that if you do these first thing in the morning, you're getting up and writing before your ego has a chance to get awake. And so you're less judgmental about what you write. And I have found in my practice that when I've been away from my morning pages and I come back to them, it takes me about 2 weeks to get all the junk, all of the complaining and the whining and the to-do lists and all of that kind of thing from being the first thing that comes up for me in the morning. And then after about 2 weeks, what starts coming to the surface are the ideas, the creativity, the things that I really want to write about, my insights and that sort of thing. So try out morning pages if that sounds appealing to you. So the benefits of writing for a clear mind, emotional balance, physical and mental health, those are becoming apparent. But I wonder whether you all believe that you can rewrite your life for the better. Okay, so again, the science is evolving. Duke University has actually done some studies around this, and there are others that are doing some too. But they're doing work on this to show that this is possible. Researchers are studying whether writing your personal story and then rewriting it more positively leads to changes in your behavior and then as a result in your mood. To understand how this can work, one thing that it's necessary to acknowledge is that your life story, your personal narrative, the stories that you tell yourself about your life have an impact on how you see yourself and the world. And I don't know about you, but I know that often my viewpoint about myself isn't always accurate. It's our stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the world are colored by everything that we've ever seen and heard and experienced. And so the Duke researchers They believe that by writing and editing your own narrative, that you'll be able to change your self-perception. Now, this is not about like changing the facts. You're still dealing with the facts, but what you're doing is identifying the obstacles. You're learning to understand them and then figure out ways to overcome them. Let me give you an example. Rather than holding really tightly to how some traumatic event in your life might have left ugly scars, shifting that to a story of how you overcame the challenges that you faced, changing that story to one that gives you courage, that reshapes your perspective about yourself and what happened. So it's not about rewriting the facts, it's a shift in perspective. So as another example, that Duke study, they worked with a group of freshmen that were suffering anxiety about their grades. They weren't sure they were going to make it through school. Another group of freshmen previous to them had written down stories about their struggles in school and then how they successfully got through school. And they recounted those stories on video, and that anxious group then watched those videos. When they heard those successful narratives from the previous group of students, then those group members were able to recognize their own negative thought patterns and to realize that they had a possibility of improving their grades and becoming successful students too. And indeed, they did go on to have a greater retention rate. More of them stayed in school. They had better grades. A control group that didn't have access to the videos, they had higher dropout rates and had lower grades. The author of that study said, these writing interventions can really nudge people from a self-defeating way of thinking into a more optimistic cycle that reinforces itself. So writing increases your sense of self-identity, where and who you are now, and of what you want to become and where you want to be in the future. I have a client who has convinced me of the power of writing to actually create the future that you want. She introduced me to a book called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And by envisioning her future and writing about it in sensory detail, lush description, she manifested the love of her life, and it changed her life. This is really close to the idea of writing about the emotions that you've experienced in the past and want to experience more of, except in this case, she actually wrote about a future experience. And it was so powerful that when she was going through some of her husband's old photographs a few years after they married, she found a picture of him dressed in a tuxedo in exactly the way she had described him in her writing before she ever met him. So if that doesn't convince you of the power of writing, I'm not sure what will, but certainly those stories that you all shared with us based on the prompt that I gave you before we went into the breakout room, I hope now that you can see that all of those things are possible. Thank you. If you all would like to try out writing, if you're not a writer, or if you are a writer and you're in the middle of a project, the Facebook group that I have, Women Writing for Change, we meet on Zoom 3 to 5 times a week and write together. If you don't have a project, we give you a prompt, but we just do a quick check-in. What you're working on? Do you need a prompt? Where are you coming in from on Zoom? And then we set a timer for 60 minutes and do a quick check-in at the end.
Gina, thank you. Everybody unmute yourselves and clap for Gina. Yes, yes.
Thank you, thank you.
You gave us so many things to think about and such great information. So I hope a lot of people watch this video because it's really good stuff, Gina. I so appreciate you being here and doing this tonight. And thank you to anyone who's watching this live or is watching the replay. If you'd like to join us for one of our 11 free Zoom gatherings a month or an in-person in Richmond, Virginia or Charlottesville, Virginia, comment below and I'll tell you how to do that. You can also go to opwgc.com and find out all about the community. Thanks for watching.